Greetings to you once again, students. We continue with our lesson on Visual Basic for Applications Programming. Today, we would like to look at using Excel functions from within VBA. There are certain inbuilt functions in Excel that we may want to apply to our Visual Basic, either functions or subroutines. How we access these, we have to be able to let Excel know that right now we want to use a function that is already part of Excel. An example of where this is going to be useful is in one of your tasks on the Black-Scholes multiplication formula. There is the equation, the set of equations that we need to solve for us to be able to get the put and the call option values. The equations look complicated at first glance, but if we go back to our lesson on algorithms, one is able to split all those into minute manageable chunks. And once you've got those minute manageable chunks, one is then able to come up with smaller functions to arrive at the bigger functions. You could decide to split the problem into the calculation of D1, calculation of D2 separately, and then be able to use those functions by calling a function within a function as mentioned earlier on to get the value of the call and the put option. You'd realize that instead of using len, we have got within Excel the log function, which is a similar version of the same function. In Visual Basic for applications, we will not have directly nomsgist, but we now need to be able to take it from the Excel worksheet functions where we are normally used to seeing it. Right now, we're at the back end of Visual Basic of Excel, which is Visual Basic, which is code driven. For VBA to know about that, we need to call it using the worksheet function keyword. Then we name the function that we use. I hope this workaround will help you when you're solving the problem of the Black-Scholes formula in part of your task. You can also utilize the object browser. The object browser allows you to have access for Excel functions. You access it by using the keyboard shortcut key F2, and a screen as on the shown there pops up. The functions are categorized depending on where they come from. They can be date functions, math functions, their collections, their constants, whatsoever categories you find on the left there, you can then access the functions on the Let's move on to conditional statements. We learned earlier on when we're using Excel worksheets that we can have if statements. Right now, we want to be able to program these in Visual Basic using code. The same explanation still exists. You use if, then, else statements where there are conditions to be tested and there is an outcome for true and an outcome for false. The syntax is as follows. You have the if keyword and the condition to be tested. Then the result if the condition is true, otherwise the result if the condition is false. Then you continue with the else if for the second set of conditions being tested. At the end, you need to have an end if you've got multiple conditions tested. There are three ways of using if statements in VBA. Here is a simple example. You can have this in your Visual Basic code. If condition, in this case our condition is the L region is equal to N, then L region name is equal to north, then we end if. Secondly, we can have multiple if statements. separated by the else if. We always have an else if after the very first if to test for several other conditions in between. Then at the end, we'll have our end if. Let's take note of the very last sentence before the end if, which is the then. That then statement caters for the last condition to be tested. We could disregard the else if L region is equal to W because we have tested for all the other regions and that is the last one. We could disregard that last else if and then just have the last statement as is. It's optional. The third way is using the else statement. So at the end of testing all the conditions, the very last statement I was mentioning before can be skipped. That condition does not necessarily have to be tested because it's obvious that when the rest of the conditions have been tested, the remaining one is catered for by the else statement. Let's carry out this example where we are checking if someone is married or is not married, and we're awarding different tax rate depending on their marital status. Hence, we can see the if else in action. There is another if with double F, which is more of a shortcut version of the if statement. In this particular case, you do not have to write the if, else, then, and the long hand of having conditions all tested. You have all these as if you were using a worksheet function, as in this example, where you separate first the condition, comma, the value if it's true, comma, the value if it's false. This is quite convenient when you're writing huge pieces of code and you've got so many conditions to be tested. It's easier to use this shorthand form of an if condition. Let's move on to iteration. Iteration, that is repetition. This is when you have got a series of steps to be carried out repeatedly. This is in some languages called looping, iteration, repetition. The concepts are going to be the same. It helps in iterating a set of statements so that you do not have to write several lines of code where just a single line of code could take care of thousands of lines of code where the program has to loop through each and every record, checking and executing a particular instruction. An example will be to sum the total balances of 1,000 customers. You do not have to have 1,000 lines of code to sum those, but you could use a loop construct, a repetitive statement to iterate through all those 1,000 records, keeping just track of the sum of those. The illustration through a flowchart is on the screen. For each iteration, you start with an initialization expression, which tells you the starting point. And we have got a condition that needs to be tested for you to continue with the iteration or for you to stop. There is a control statement. If this condition is true, then do this. Otherwise, do something else. If it's false, you go back into the loop and you continue iterating. Let's look at an example which is more vivid. In this example, we start with the variable I, which is equal to 2. We check if that variable I is less than or equal to 6. If it is less than or equal to 6, we print I plus 1, that is we add 1 to it. Then we go back by incrementing I to I plus 2. We continue this condition until I is breaks the condition of being less than or equal to 6. That is, when I becomes 7, then the iteration stops because the condition of false is associated with exiting the loop, and we stop execution. Programmatically, let us do this example where we want to populate the first 6 of column 1, A1, the first 6 rows of column 1 by a value of 100. That is the code there where we are saying for I equals to 1 to 6, cells I1 dot value is equal to 100. Next I. Remember the cells method of accessing, of reading and writing values into Excel. That is what we're applying now in this for loop. We expect at the end of this code to have A1 to A6 having a value of 100. Try it on your Excel and VBA. There is also another way of doing iteration, which is a for each loop. You can carry out the example given on your code there and execute it, and let's see the results during our live sessions. The third way to do repetition is the do while loop. You do certain steps while a particular condition is true. In this case, we want to have the cells to have a value of 20 as long as they are less than 6. We haven't reached row 6. And at each and every iteration, we increase to move to the next row. We put in 20, move on to the next row, we put in 20 until we get to row 5. Once we get to row 6, the condition is now false. Hence, we exit the loop. There is also the do until loop. Please take note of the syntax. Each and every loop construct has got its own way of being implemented in VBA. You are expected to observe that syntax. Where is a statement to be executed, and you follow it as is. It is syntax. We have come to the end of this lesson, and I hope we are following through and carrying out practical examples of each of these. As we do these, think of scenarios in your current work situation or in your current business where you could utilize some of these constructs in solving your day-to-day business problems. Let's meet again at the next lesson. Thank you.